As the bell tolled, Constance Grayle dragged her friend Kate through the crowd, wondering if there was a festival going on. Kate tried telling Constance they should go home, but someone would bump into them and they'd be separated. Panicking and unable to find her friend, Constance ran through the crowd, accidentally walking past a barricade where the punishment was to be administered. Watching the cloaked woman ascend the steps of the podium, they'd unveil her, and seeing the woman's hair black as night, eyes amethyst glimmering, Constance thought she was so pretty. A brief silence. Then the woman said, "A curse upon you! A curse upon you all!" Rain began to pour, and the people called her a fiend, murderer, and that she was the cursed one. Constance covered her ears and closed her eyes. She's never witnessed the feral wickedness that lied within the common everyday man. She opened her eyes, and they locked with the woman's. In this brief moment, it's like the world was soundless. The woman let off a sad smile, and as the bell tolled once more, she uttered something only Constance could hear. The executioner drew his blade. As the woman knelt down, lightning struck. At the same moment he struck her. Blood splattered on Constance, and with the woman's head presented, the people cheered. "It's over! She's dead!" A traumatizing experience little Constance would scream over. We turned to the Lesser Palace, Grand Merillion. It had been 10 years since that night at St. Mark's Square. Constance was 16 now. Viscount Hamsworth congratulated her, saying surely the fates would bless her union, especially since the Grayle family motto was, "Thou shalt act with sincerity." She pondered on that. A few months ago, her father, the living embodiment of the Grayle family's sincerity, found himself under a mountain of debt. On to condition that the Bronson family pay for it, she became engaged to Mr. Bronson's son and heir, Neil. He was quite the gentleman. She couldn't deny that she's dreamed of marrying for love, but a plain, dull girl like her getting a handsome, well-mannered gentleman to consent to become her husband, she considered herself blessed, or so she thought. Her friend Mylene had heard the news. However, everyone was talking about Neil and Pamela Francis. Someone saw them together in each other's arms when they thought no one was watching. This was shocking news for Constance. Kate told Mylene to stop spreading groundless rumors, but Mylene went further. She heard Pamela went through men the way normal people went through dance partners. This weighed heavily on Constance's mind. She trusted Neil. He was his usual kind self to her this very day. Unfortunately, she'd find him holding Pamela under the streetlight. Pamela spotted her and smirked, pulling Neil in for a kiss. Constance ran away, teary-eyed. She wished she could pretend she hadn't seen them. Still, she needed to face this with sincerity and talk it through with him. She turned and eeked, suddenly seeing a woman beside her, and by a glance, Constance thought she was gorgeous. Looking at the ballroom, the woman said, "Sure seems festive." Constance invited her inside, and because of that, the woman was allowed in. She thanked Constance for helping her. Constance continued to ponder on what to do with Neil. And then, Brenda meekly congratulated her engagement. Constance felt she'd seen Brenda around before with Pamela. As Brenda took her leave, Constance noticed her hair ornament was falling off. Brenda's eyes nervously widened, spotting Pamela above. Constance tried to help her out, and Brenda made the excuse that she needed to get her evening bag upstairs, and asked that Constance look after her hair ornament. Some time passed, and Pamela would shout Constance's name. Pamela made a scene, saying she was well aware of Constance's family situation, but she's gone too far. She announced Constance stole Brenda's hair ornament. The framing was diabolic. Pamela suggested Constance, being short on money, would do anything she could to get some by stealing Brenda's valuable ornament. Neil couldn't believe Constance would steal, but Pamela would take her bag from her, and out from it came the ornament. Pamela told her to explain in front of everyone, and Constance begged Brenda to please tell them the truth. Pamela told Constance to stop with the pitiful excuses, and coddled Brenda, who was trembling in fear. She then told Neil that now that he could see what Constance was really like, he should annul his engagement right away. Marrying her would sully the Bronson Company's reputation. He felt bad though, because there wasn't exactly concrete proof. Pamela said the proof was every witness here, and since they had Priest Viscount Hamsworth, they could annul it right away. Constance was frantic, but Pamela would use her own family's motto against her. "Thou shalt act with sincerity." Pamela said so much for the sincerity of the Grayles, calling Constance a no-good robber. I really hate this stupid bitch. My ideal world? Send her and people like her to the gallows. As people clamored, Constance fell to her knees, begging anyone to help her. The woman from earlier said, "Very well, I'll help you out for a price. She spoke through Constance, saying, "And which one of us is the robber here exactly?" Pamela was shocked. She hated how Constance always proudly spouted nonsense about sincerity. She's never liked her, and hated how everything fell into her lap, even though Constance was far inferior to her in both looks and family fortune. That's why she decided to use Brenda to destroy her. Pamela tried to clap back, but Constance cut her off, reminding her the man she was so sensually riding in the bushes was her dear fiancé. Ha! Shame her for being a hoe. Pamela shrieked that they were just kissing, and Neil stopped her. But since Pamela was kissing Constance's fiancé, Constance argued that actually made her the robber. Constance then turned towards the various crowd guests who witnessed Brenda hand over her ornament, and walked towards Wayne, who was the first one to notice what actually happened. She pressed him enough until he eventually said the truth, and the other guests all started talking about what really happened. The Viscount would come down, and Constance told him to void her engagement at once, because if he didn't, she'd make sure word of tonight's party at the Grand Merillion, held by him, where this couple consorted to engage in carnal acts in the sacred royal garden, would reach His Majesty's ears by whatever means necessary. Pamela didn't understand. This wasn't the Constance Grail she knew. Constance bowed out, wishing the young couple consumed by illicit passion be blessed. With her walking out, Pamela would chase after, but be tripped by one of the ladies. The woman in green regarded Constance quite favorably, and found Pamela's actions galling. Where she was from, adulterers wore piping hot shoes, and danced until they died. Neil and Pamela danced, Pamela's feet bloodying without shoes, and the bystanders' carnal retribution satisfied by the sight. They were surprised by Constance. It was almost as if Scarlet Castile herself crawled back out from the deepest pits of hell to speak through her. The next morning, Constance woke up from what she thought was a dream, but found Scarlet by her bedside. A shocking sight. She shrieked. When Scarlet introduced herself, Constance thought that couldn't possibly be true. Scarlet Castile was executed 10 years ago, but with the woman now floating in the air, it was evident she definitely wasn't alive. Scarlet was a wicked woman beyond comparison. She plotted to poison her romantic rival, Cecilia, a Viscount's daughter, to the Crown Prince Enrique, denouncing her crimes at the Grand Merillion. And not only was their engagement annulled, but her utterly ruthless behavior led to her execution 10 years ago. Scarlet didn't remember a thing about the day she was executed, but the Grand Merillion was where she was humiliated by that idiotic Enrique and that black-hearted Cecilia. Remembering infuriated her. When she came to, she found herself in that place, but for some reason couldn't enter the hall. She was sure it was thanks to Constance she was able to enter. She matter-of-factly told Constance she seemed plain, unassuming, and had no redeeming traits. But the fact she noticed Scarlet was something she could be proud of. What a smug ghost. Scarlet was here to make sure Constance held her part of the deal. Constance would append the rest of her life, ensuring Scarlet succeeded in getting vengeance. Scarlet made up her mind to send every last one of those scoundrels who had executed her to hell. You'd think she knew who they were, but she was clueless. How could she know? After all, she was set up. She wasn't the type to resort to something so pedestrian as poisoning Cecilia. Constance would become her agent, unmasking the culprit and sentencing them to hell on earth. Connie was skeptical about this, but Scarlet mentioned that her family was in debt. Plus, she didn't have much of a choice with her marriage being annulled. Scarlet asked if refusing to repay her sounded like the Grail's sincerity her family boasted of. Constance would have to agree to the deal. Shortly after, she'd visit an orphanage, telling the nun that she came on behalf of the Orlamoons and introducing herself as Letty. She explained that the family wished to collect letters from the Maurice home for orphaned children to commemorate Lady Lily's death this day. This was all a part of the plan to question those who might have known what happened to Scarlet. She figured Lily Orlamoon would be useful. After all, they were friends. After Scarlet's death, Lily devoted herself to good works to atone for her crimes. People referred to her as the White Lily of charity for her fairness. Constance admired her. However, 2 years ago, Lily poisoned herself, ending her own life in her family's chapel. The reason for her action remained unknown till this day. To Scarlet, it didn't make sense that Lily would choose self-end, especially for someone so ill-natured. Weren't they friends? Apparently, Scarlet didn't see it that way. She'd sooner do a handstand dance on a cliff's edge than keep company with her. Constance recalled stories of Lily usually visiting Scarlet when no one else would. Back then, Lily knew Scarlet would never try something like poisoning Cecilia. Still, it meant there was someone out there who was capable of framing a woman of her caliber, and they had no idea who this was. So, Lily had come to bid her goodbye, thinking this business was beyond her. She would have loved to assist Scarlet, but her own life was more precious to her. After receiving the letters from the kids, Constance was to visit the scene of Lily's self-end. For this, she would have to properly dress up as a nun. Arriving at the Marquess of Orlamun's residence, she greeted the guard. Despite his frightening glare, he led her to the chapel. Getting inside, Constance tried to pay her respects to the deceased by praying, but Scarlet claimed Lily wouldn't be pleased by any of that. She'd rather have them hurry up and find out the truth. Knowing Lily, Scarlet suspected she would have left a clue behind the painting. As Constance lifted it, she found something attached to the back. Sensing someone was about to open the door, she quickly took the item and hid it. As the man entered, Scarlet couldn't believe it was Randolph Ulster. What was he doing here? Apparently, Constance told Scarlet that Lily was married to Randolph Ulster of the House of Richelieu. However, Scarlet saw him as her nemesis. Some even referred to Randolph as the Lord of Death. Randolph then asked Constance about George, the little red-headed boy he often played with at the orphanage. Before she could answer incorrectly, Scarlet told her to answer that George had chestnut hair, while Tony was actually the kid with red hair. Nice save. After making things clear, Constance excused herself. Randolph offered to walk her back to the orphanage, and she appreciated the offer, but would have to decline, claiming she had errands to run. Finally out of the chapel, she was relieved to be away from someone so intimidating. She wondered if Randolph suspected her. Scarlet couldn't tell, but knew the man had a keener nose than was good for him. Back in the chapel, Randolph noticed the painting was slanted and saw pieces of what Constance had ripped off on the floor. Returning to the orphanage, Constance dropped the clothes she was given at the gate, and a little money as well. The children suddenly approached her, and Tony said, "Kiriki kirikuku," whatever the hell that meant. Constance was confused. He told her it was a spell for spotting bad guys, which they had learned from Lily. Before she died, she taught them this spell, telling them to recite it to whoever came asking about her. If the person reacted, it meant they were a very bad person. And in that circumstance, the children were to round up everyone and run for it. Could this mean Lily was murdered? Back home, Constance was exhausted. She opened the package she found, which held a key and a piece of paper with one instruction: destroy the Holy Grail of Eris. Neither of the two had any idea what it meant. Eris was the goddess of discord and strife in the myth of Ferris, a wicked deity who was said to have driven a nation to ruin. That was according to a legend from their country, Adelbide's neighboring land. Eris was also the alias Scarlet used when she wanted to have fun during nightlife. As for the key, it had a number engraved on it, but nothing to indicate which workshop it was made in. There weren't enough clues to figure out what it was for. Later on, Constance would meet up with Kate. Her friends were worried about her, especially since her engagement was called off. The events had made it to the papers with the headline, "Poor Constance Grail proves even a lamb will charge at a hound when provoked." That was the Mayflower's editorial take on the matter anyway. Pamela headed back to her family's domain the next day. Though they claimed it was for her health, everyone knew she ran away like the little wimp she was. As for Neil, the Bronson Company's aristocratic clients started a boycott. Just this morning, he had come to apologize to Constance, and she told him how to stop the people coming after them. She didn't blame the rest of the people at the Bronson Company. She was way too sincere for her own good. Still, Kate warned her to be careful, since she had become an overnight celebrity. Even though Constance didn't want to mention where she was last night, Kate didn't mind. She would always be there if her friend needed her help. Considering what had happened, Kate figured Constance wanted nothing to do with men. That was until she saw an invitation letter inviting Constance to Amelia Godwin's ball. She wished Constance good luck on her journey finding a new man. After she left, Scarlet decided they'd be attending the ball, knowing Baroness Godwin loved nothing more than to talk of the misfortune of others. If they played their cards right, Amelia would sing for them like a canary in mating season. Arriving at the ball, Constance approached Amelia Godwin. In one glance, Amelia thought she was more refined than before, but still a far cry from Scarlet. Greeting her, Constance mimicked Scarlet's mannerisms perfectly, to the point that it scared Amelia. With Amelia gone, Scarlet spotted Aisha Huxley and asked Constance to go see what she had to say. But Constance panicked upon spotting Randolph. She begged Scarlet to take over, but the ghost couldn't stand the man, so she abandoned Constance without a second thought. Randolph walked up to her, referring to Constance as the sister he saw the other day. With her trying to feign ignorance, he went straight to the point. What did she want? Was it his late wife's will, or was there something else she was after? Scared to tears, she prayed for someone to save her. Scarlet would come back and deal with what she was running from. Taking over Constance's body, she asked if Randolph had any proof of his claims. He proposed going back to the orphanage to see if they'd confirm that she was the same Letty who visited on behalf of the Orlamunds. She declined, valuing herself too highly to arrange a date with a gentleman she just met. Suddenly, they were interrupted by the sound of shattering glass and gasps from the crowd. Margot Tudor had attacked Teresa Jennings, breaking a glass on her, claiming Teresa had an affair with her husband. After tending to the matter, Randolph decided to let Constance go for the day, but he wondered if she could really say she wasn't involved. After the party, Constance would come across Amelia outside. She asked what exactly happened to Scarlet 10 years ago. Amelia answered it was the usual story of her being executed because she tried to poison Cecilia. But Constance felt there was more. Amelia would then tell her that in the 7th Division of Inmest Mars, at the old Montrose residence, the invitation was an Earl John Doe's hat. Leaving, she added that those who won in life were those who survived. So she hoped Constance wouldn't be forced to make an early exit. Into liking the video and subscribing to my channel. You better subscribe, or when I die, I'll come and haunt you from the grave. And it'd be a grave mistake not to watch my Villainess playlist. There's at least 20 hour-long plus videos about villainesses in it for you to enjoy. So come on, hit that subscribe or you might die. Scarlet suspected Amelia was talking about the Earl John Doe ball. This was a secret ball where nobles hid their faces behind masks. It was probably the best place to gather intelligence. She mentioned that the lowlives who infested such balls feared not even the gods. To get Constance a mask, they'd have to sneak into Scarlet's old home. Considering Scarlet was a regular at these balls, someone might approach Constance if she wore her old mask. It would also be a chance for Constance to find out about the lurid secrets of the guests. Be you sincere? Constance always thought this was the right mindset to follow. However, her father was tricked and Pamela framed her. Sincerity alone wouldn't solve anything. If what it took to make things right was wickedness, then Constance was ready to do it. Sneaking into the Castillo residence, Constance thought it was quite enormous. She would get stopped by a stern man, asking where she was going. She answered she was heading over to the dressing room, so he pointed her in the right direction. Emotions filled Scarlet as she stared at this blonde-haired man, who was her big brother. She didn't think there was much of a resemblance between them. After all, they had different mothers. But Constance thought otherwise, saying the way they addressed her and the air about them were similar. Scarlet asked Constance if she had heard of Cornelia of the Starry Crown. She was the last empress of the neighboring country of Ferris, which was known to be a vast empire. At the time, the Ferris Empire pursued a strategy of marrying royalty from the nations it invaded to rule them. Then, an imperial prince eloped with a certain lady, and they had a daughter who came to be known as Cornelia of the Starry Crown. Her lineage entitled her to many crowns of vassal states, as numerous as the stars, not to mention the imperial throne. Even Adelbide was part of her empire back then. When the vassal states finally rebelled and the empire fell, she escaped harm in the neutral nation of Soldita. Time passed, and word spread that a country girl in Soldita carried the blood of Cornelia of the Starry Crown. She was known as Crownless Eleanor, Scarlet's mother. That meant Scarlet was descended from the imperial family of Ferris. After the little story time, Constance retrieved the mask. Getting to the old Montrose residence, Constance was allowed in after saying the secret phrase, "It's an Earl John Doe's hat." In the hall, smoke filled the air as the nobles chatted discreetly with one another. Without wasting time, Scarlet led her to see the hostess, Deborah Darkian. Constance would introduce herself as heiress, sparking attention from people around. There used to be a guest with the same name 10 years ago, but Deborah claimed she was a reckless girl who got her head parted from her body. She hoped Constance's head remained firmly attached. While getting something to eat, Constance noticed a sweet smell. It was coming from a woman Scarlet knew as Jane. Before Constance could figure out anything about her, she was approached by Viscount Hamsworth. Safe to say, his costume and mask couldn't hide his looks. Here, he preferred to be called Moon-Dappled Ham. Was he even trying to hide it all? Saying the phrase, "hide a tree in the forest," the Viscount felt someone had brought some rotten wood tonight. Suddenly, someone ran in, alerting everyone that the security force had caught on. Everyone quickly scattered to save themselves. As Scarlet suspected, something was off about those 3 dancing girls. Someone was using this ball as a cover for human trafficking. Amidst the madness, Jane bumped into Constance, falling to the ground. Her wrist snapped. Blood slowly poured out. Scarlet told Constance to run quickly, but she couldn't just leave the lady. Ripping her dress, she tied the wound. Scarlet warned she'd be doomed if they caught her. Even if she had done nothing wrong, she'd be put to death in no time. Constance's good heart would be the end of her. As the officer grabbed her, Scarlet raged. Lightning shot through, causing the man to let go. A violent wind blew, taking out the lights like a bad omen. The officer would then point his blade at Constance, demanding to know who she was. That's when Randolph came to her rescue, stopping his comrade. George argued that she was using some kind of trickery, but Randolph asked if that was more important than saving the wounded. Without a doubt, Constance had no hand in the human trafficking, so Randolph saw no reason to arrest her. Still, they had met 3 times. At this point, it had to be fate. So, he asked her to come clean with him. Constance looked to Scarlet for help, but she wasn't interested. Randolph was born in the house of Richelieu. They were great nobles on par with the Castilles. Seeing no other choice, Constance asked if he was willing to negotiate. He easily saw through her and asked if she was willing to suffer through a scandal. Abandoning her sincerity, she was ready to take on whatever life threw at her. Randolph told her the simplest method was to get engaged. Before even understanding his words, she blurted out, "I'd like nothing better." And then it finally clicked. Well, it was already too late. The next day, they went to a priest to bless their union. Now, Constance understood why Scarlet avoided Randolph. With this union, they could clear the Grail family's debts, and he had a pretext to keep an eye on her. Of course, she'd be free to annul the engagement before long. Constance didn't see how this union benefited him, and she'd be shocked to hear that he wasn't interested in getting married. Having a fiancé would act as a repellent towards any ladies approaching him, so in the end, the union was quite beneficial. Getting down to business, she explained wanting to clear Scarlet's ghost of her false conviction. Ralph thought her story was preposterous. It was unusually consistent for fiction. Sometimes, she resembled Scarlet so much that he could almost believe she was her. He didn't mind if she wanted to clear Scarlet's name, stating her desire to help others was laudable. Randolph asked if there was anything else Constance was hiding, following Scarlet's orders. She told him there was none, but boy, was she a poor liar. He could see right through her. Constance's debt problems were over, so Scarlet felt she was done helping her. However, Constance mentioned that when she was faced with problems she couldn't solve herself, she screamed inwardly for someone to help her, and eventually, Scarlet came to her rescue. She wanted to properly thank Scarlet for saving her. Now, it was her time to return the favor. Back at the Royal Security Office, Kyle burst into the room, complaining that the hostages they caught took poison and died in jail. But he confirmed their ringleader didn't have a sun tattoo, which meant they had no ties to the De Gallus organization. He suggested bringing Constance in for questioning, and Randolph shocked him by revealing his engagement to her. And he was set to visit the El Bait Villa with her tomorrow. At the villa, Randolph and Constance would meet the Crown Prince, Enrique Adelbide, the same man who broke his betrothal to Scarlet. The Crown Princess, Cecilia Adelbide, then walked in, dazzling in a radiant beauty. She quickly took a liking to Constance, and also wanted them to have tea together sometime. Between Randolph's mean stare and Cecilia's bright personality, Constance didn't know which scared her more. Cecilia didn't like that Randy picked a day to visit when she had official commitments. Like a switch, her personality suddenly became condescending. Seeing him look so put out was a rare treat for her, so she forgave him. She was to receive a distinguished guest from the south after this. As Cecilia grabbed Constance's hands, it felt so cold, almost like her bright persona wasn't real. Changing the subject, Randolph asked Enrique if he had heard from Ferris's emissary. The Crown Prince mentioned they were a proud bunch who had nothing but history to boast of. He wouldn't mind if their economic woes were as bad as rumors painted them. On their way out, Constance asked Scarlet why she disliked Cecilia. However, it was Cecilia who took a dislike to Scarlet first. It was more like Cecilia regarded everyone who entered her sight with enmity. Only one word could truly describe it: hatred. King Ernst Adelbide would then approach Constance. He had heard she was the second coming of Scarlet, but she seemed like quite the charming young lady. Walking through a flower field, he told her that the violets in their kingdom tend to have a reddish hue. There was a legend stating that a sprite that dwelt in Adelbide's violets were careless. It drew too close to the dead, burning in hell, suffering horrible burns itself. When asked what she thought of this, Scarlet took over. She thought perhaps the flower sprite hoped to save the dead. It wouldn't dare go on blooming so boldly if it hadn't anything to be ashamed of. Hearing this, Ernst was reminded of Scarlet. Knowing her, she would most likely say, "The affairs of wildflowers are no concern of mine." At that moment, it was as if the king could see Scarlet in front of him. Constance informed Randolph that she had been summoned by an investigative committee. Deborah Darkian summoned her to the Twilight Room at the Grand Merillion for investigation. It wasn't legally enforceable. Randolph saw no reason for her to play along. Regardless, Constance planned to go. She was certain there was much more she needed to learn. According to Scarlet, Deborah's investigative committee's gatherings were famous, but none knew what transpired there. No one breathed a word about it. Hence, it was given the name the Silent Ladies' Tea Party, lit up with only candles. Deborah welcomed Constance, stamping with a blood print. Constance agreed not to speak of anything that happened here. Deborah revealed she had received a letter from Pamela, saying that nothing Constance did broke the law. So, Deborah and her friends would do the honor of judging Constance, so she wouldn't end up like Scarlet. Deborah mocked Scarlet's last impression as her face rolled through the mud like a toy. She could never bear the shame of such an ignominious end. Rage filled with Scarlet's eyes, but with Constance holding her hand, she calmed down. This time around, they'd fight together. With Scarlet taking over, they'd be the judges now. She assumed the Earl John Doball must have been a blow to Deborah. However, Deborah claimed to be the one who reported the dancing children to the security force. She sarcastically remarked, the mere thought of human traffickers in their midst made her blood run cold. But why did everyone here have ties to the Darkians? Take the Marquess of McLean, who looked so friendly with the slavers. Scarlet was talking about Esther's husband. She doubted he'd be able to avoid prison, but might receive a lighter sentence if he named the ringleader. Using Randolph's position as leverage, she offered to put in a good word for Esther's husband, depending on her testimony. Now the tables had flipped. The Marchioness of McLean must have known Deborah had a hand in the crime. Constance hoped she could get her to attest to that. Deborah would pressure Esther, mentioning that her husband was about to leave the country and wouldn't be back for a while. During this time, Esther couldn't defy her. The thought of a Viscount's daughter crushing a Darkian was laughable. Now, it was time to cast votes. Things weren't looking good for Constance, but if she bent the knee like a good little girl, Deborah might consider Pamela's words as imagination. But Constance didn't agree with her methods. She refused to back down. Suddenly, the doors flung open as Abigail O'Brien barged in and opened the curtains. The four great noble families of the kingdom were the Castiles, the Richelieus, the Darkians, and the O'Briens. Abigail sat in Susanna Neville's seat. Presenting her credentials, she stamped with her blood print. And then she uttered, Esther, Janine, Carol. Unless you want to be crushed, do as I say. Seeing this as a threat, Deborah argued that she must have legal recourse if Abigail insisted on menacing her friends. But that wouldn't work. After all, everything said here wasn't allowed to leave the room. Furious, Deborah would excuse herself. Afterwards, Abigail warned Constance not to take such thoughtless risks. She told her to save her thanks for Randolph. He came calling at Abigail's house, asking her to help his fiancée. He had looked into the participants and acquired the letter for her. Hearing this, Constance felt warm and fuzzy on the inside. Leaving the building, she was suddenly grabbed by a reporter, Amelia Hobbs. Amelia asked when she started looking up to Scarlet, and if she was rebelling against the famous Grail family ideal of sincerity. She assumed Constance was frustrated when the papers all focused on Teresa Jennings' death. The man she was having an affair with broke it off, so she tried to kill him when she took her own life. Amelia's never-ending questions were then stopped by her colleague, Aldous Clayton. Handing Constance's card, he mentioned that he was from the Mayflower Company. The following day, Constance was embarrassed by the newspaper headlines. Miss C, the daughter of a viscount, emulates the infamous Scarlet Castile. She indulges in now-banned hallucinogens and spends her days in wild orgies. Complete nonsense! Mylene was quite disappointed, especially since she looked up to Amelia as a role model. Her dream was to stay unmarried and become a reporter. After all, she had always been obsessed with chasing rumors. Constance was even the one who suggested she become a reporter. Heading out, Constance was approached by Kimberly Smith, a lady who represented the Ladies' Committee of the Violet Association. They were working to rid their land of inhumane culture. So, Kimberly had come to remonstrate with the young lady who idolized Scarlet. Constance wanted nothing more than to leave. She was having quite the day. Kimberly hoped the bit about her hallucinogens wasn't referring to Jackal's paradise. Suddenly, Scarlet showed up. It seemed she knew something about this. Constance turned to her, but Kimberly redirected her attention back. The lady felt aristocrats such as her were bigots, who didn't even consider the common folk as human. That's when Kate showed up, questioning if her family were also bigots, simply because they were of nobility. As passerbys began whispering, Kimberly excused herself and left. Then, Kate approached Constance, asking if she truly got engaged to the Earl of Ulster. She was deeply hurt that her friend would keep this from her. Filled with guilt, Constance felt she was an awful friend, but Kate was the one person she couldn't get dragged into all this. The next day, Constance met up with Randolph, thanking him for his help with the investigative committee. Walking through the garden, they caught sight of a man running past them. He was Kendall Levine, a high-ranking diplomat and a special envoy from Ferris. Seeing how flustered he and his subordinates were, Scarlet suspected they had lost a member of their delegation. Someone with the name Ulysses had been missing since yesterday. Randolph suspected it was Ulysses Ferris, the 9-year-old 7th Prince of Ferris. The Parisians had been surprisingly quiet about this. He would need to return to the security force quickly. As for Constance's meeting with Cecilia, she promised to be careful. The Crown Princess wouldn't trip her up if she could help it. If all else failed, she'd use his name. Scarlet would then leave to find clues about who abducted the little prince amidst all this security. Upon meeting with Cecilia, the Crown Prince was upset to hear that Randolph had urgent matters to attend to. Nevertheless, she was happy to have a guest. Meanwhile, Scarlet informed Constance of her findings. There was a suspicious man known as Vado, a merchant from the Republic of Sodita. He had come to see Cecilia. The Crown Princess boasted her fine collection of antiques, which came from all over the continent. Vado usually found them for her, and he even visited her yesterday with some fine carpets. As Cecilia poured her tea, Constance noticed a distinctive smell. Cecilia used to be rather sickly, so Vado fetched her a special herb tea as a favor. Considering she was nearly poisoned, Constance assumed she was always on guard. Hence, her tea was different from Cecilia's. The Crown Princess would then tell her the full story. The day Enrique reneged on an appointment with Scarlet in order to pay her a get-well visit, Scarlet was furious. That very night, they found out one of their water jars had been poisoned, and Scarlet's earring lay beside the poisoned jar. A half-empty bottle of poison was also discovered in her home. Following that, she was executed for her crimes. But Cecilia admitted she herself was guilty of falling in love with Enrique, knowing he was engaged. It was also her fault he had no children. She assumed he would cede the throne to his younger brother, Johann, who had a son and a daughter. Cecilia put on quite the act to win favor around her, but Scarlet couldn't be fooled. She could tell that the herbal tea was poisoned to terminate pregnancy. The after effects should be wreaking havoc on her insides. Cecilia's body must be as cold as ice. Seeing the Crown Princess drink the tea caused Constance to squeal. Scarlet let her know that she would become a target now. But Constance couldn't just let an unsuspecting person drink poison. Scarlet tried to pretend that she was lying, but Constance could always tell when she was speaking the truth. As for Vado, his hamper could be used to carry a small child. So, they decided to do some more digging. After visiting some companies, they learned Ferris had a monopoly on that abortion drug, but no one knew of the man named Vado. Scarlet claimed this itself was valuable information. Suddenly, their carriage stopped, and the coachman mentioned there was something wrong with the tires. As he came back, Scarlet immediately noticed the coachman's voice was different. Opening the window, Constance was startled by a man staring right at her, causing her to jolt back. To check if he was a bad man, she said the same words the kids told her back then, Kiriki, Kirikuku. The man instantly tried to unlock the door, but Scarlet would use her powers to push him back. In desperation, he pulled out a gun to shoot. Oh my god, is she dead? Blood splattered on the window of the carriage. Constance was safe. Opening the door was Aldous Clayton. She couldn't believe it. He looked nothing like the same person she had seen earlier. As she noticed him, Aldous turned around, remarking that he would have let her be if she were none the wiser. Aiming his gun at her, he said she was about as foolish as they came. Shortly after, they would arrive at Folkvanger, the House of Plenty, on Rosencruz Street, or as Constance knew it, the infamous high-class brothel. She feared Aldous was about to sell her. Getting inside, Abigail laughed at the whole situation. Apparently, Aldous was so shocked that Constance recognized him, so he brought her here. Abigail was the owner of the place, and Aldous, whom she referred to as Rudy, was basically her guard dog. The Mayflower company he worked at also belonged to her. As for the man who wanted to attack Constance, Aldous shot him in the leg, but he wasn't fazed. He turned out to be a trained soldier, not just any dealer. For someone who sold nasty drugs, what did he want with Constance? She wondered if she might have done something. Suddenly, Randolph came running into the room, panting and out of breath, but his breath steadied as he set his eyes on her. He had come for his Constance. On the carriage ride back, she apologized for worrying him so much, but he, too, understood there was nothing she could have done. However, in the future, it would be better if she informed him before taking any initiative. Turning to Scarlet, Constance noticed she wasn't all right. Scarlet was a bit sleepy. Using that power back then drained her, so she decided to take some rest. Arriving home, Kyle approached Randolph, letting him know they'd be working late again. It was concerning the body of the coachman who was shot. Kyle mentioned he had a sun tattoo on the nape of his neck. Constance recalled she had seen that same work on the body of a woman who collapsed during the masquerade ball. Randolph referred to her as Kiara Grafton, but Constance told him that Scarlett referred to the woman as Jane. Hearing that she had a sweet smell about her, Randolph confirmed that it was Jackal's paradise. It was a potent hallucinogen, also known as Jane in certain circles. The coachman who attacked Constance was also a drug dealer who had the same tattoo. She wondered who these people were. Randolph explained that they were a vast criminal syndicate they'd been pursuing for a long time. Murdering, kidnapping, human trafficking, hallucinogen smuggling. They were known for all kinds of crimes. It was said they belonged to no nation and would do anything for the right price. Their name? De Gallus, which meant the rooster that crows at dawn. The following day, Kate would come visit Constance. A messenger from the Grail house had come to them last night, saying she hadn't come home, and asked if they knew anything. She wanted to know what Constance had gotten herself into. Was it something dangerous? And if it was best to give up on it. Constance couldn't bring herself to tell Kate. It was way too dangerous. Kate was the last person she should tell about this, but her actions only served to hurt her friend more. Not a word about her engagement, and now, not a word about this. An explanation would have helped, but Constance would only apologize and then dismiss her. As Kate left, a strange man showed up in front of Constance's gate, dropping a package. Without considering the risks, she rushed to pick it up, and its contents would leave her shocked. Inside was a lock of Kate's hair, and a letter that read, "Come alone to the shore of Lake Bernadia at noon tomorrow. Don't breathe a word to anyone. If you miss our appointment, we'll send you a finger next." Elsewhere, Shoshana would open the door for Salvador, welcoming him back. Seeing the big bag he was carrying, she curiously asked what it was, and as he rolled it open, there she saw Ulysses Ferris, the seventh prince of Ferris. We turned to where Kate was being held prisoner. The kidnapper then came in, asking her where Lily Orlamoon's key was. He dragged her hair, telling her not to play dumb. The man knew Constance had the key, but she had never heard of such a thing. And even if she knew about it, she'd never tell him. Just as he was about to beat her up, Salvador walked in. He made it clear that Jose's job was to sell paradise, meaning he had no right to pull a stunt like this. The man explained that looking for the key was part of their job too. His partner was following a lead and got bumped off the moment he touched Constance. But all that didn't matter to Salvador. Salvador asked Kate if she resented Constance, but she didn't. On the contrary, meeting Constance was the best fortune she ever had, and she had never been prouder of anything than she was of being her friend. 11 years ago, during a cold winter, Kate's mom would give her a basket of cookies as she went for her first real party. At the venue, she didn't have the chance to properly greet Pamela before getting mocked for the way she smelled. Bruh, Pamela was a stupid bitch even back then. Constance was the only one who didn't insult her like the others. In fact, she thought Kate smelled like cookies. Pamela and her cronies would walk off, irritated. Kate would then share her cookies with her. Constance immediately fell in love with the delicious taste. From then on, they became close friends. Sulking in her bed, Constance worried about her friend, but she couldn't remain sitting around doing nothing. On her way out, she bumped into Randolph. He was here to ask Scarlett if there was anyone else at the ball using Jackal's paradise. Recalling the warning from the letter, Constance couldn't bring herself to tell him about it. It might endanger Kate. However, Scarlett would mention Norman Holden. He was someone who had quite the Jane habit as well. With the message relayed, Randolph left to look into him. As he walked away, Constance tried to reach out, but held herself back. In the end, she got Kate involved in the worst possible way. Their friendship might never be the same after this, but she was determined to save her. Arriving at the location, Constance was taken to see Kate. Both were held as hostages. Furious to see her, Kate questioned why she came. She didn't want to be saved if it came at Constance's expense. Kate would be released, but not as Constance expected. More like taken away to be executed. Constance screamed for them to stop. Before being taken away, Kate told her to follow her own path. This wasn't the promise, but what did Constance expect? There was no way kidnappers would be true to their word. She struggled, offering to do anything if they would just let her go. The next second, a loud bang echoed through the woods. Constance fell to her knees, regret filling her up as she screamed at the world. Suddenly, Randolph showed up with his forces. He had already arrested the goons in the woods. It was all a setup, one that Scarlett was quite aware of. At the security force office, Randolph revealed that Earl Norman Holden had passed away 13 years ago. There was no way he'd be at that ball. He was an old coot whose hobby was preaching the goddess's word at people. One day, someone flew into a rage and killed him over it. Norman's last words were, "Oh God, save me!" And this was how Scarlet passed the message to Randolph. Constance would then apologize for worrying him. Randolph, realizing he was actually worried about her, surprised all of them. Then, word came that Kate's treatment was done. On their way out, Constance was approached by Amelia. Today, she wasn't looking for how to use Constance for a juicy headline. Instead, she wanted help. She had a scoop that could shake the entire kingdom about Cecilia. According to her, the crown princess had the blood of a prostitute in her veins. Her family, the Luzes, were a proper line of blue-blooded viscounts after all. However, Amelia had gotten a tip that their family register showed signs of tampering. Although Viscount Luz had a daughter with his wife, the daughter was said to have died in an epidemic quite some time ago. It turned out the Viscount had another daughter. Although her rose-red eyes proved she was of Luz blood, he'd given her to an orphanage because her mother was only his mistress. They say this girl and a boy at the same orphanage swore eternal love. The girl's name was Cece. The crown princess often slipped out of the palace to visit the people of the slums. It was famously proof of her virtue. However, Amelia suspected she was secretly meeting up with her old lover. Sadly, her source went and turned into a drug addict. Now, she needed someone else who was close to Cecilia. This was where Constance would come in, and she wasn't given much of a choice in this. Meeting up with Kate, she rushed into her arms. Kate was still trembling from the trauma. Constance then told her there was something she had to hear. At the same time, Jose was secretly taken out in his prison cell. And this secret assassin was Crown Princess Cecilia. She'd meet up with Salvador, who asked her to take the chance to bear the prince's child. But it'd be harder for her to get anything done in this state. As for why he was here, he had a message from headquarters. They were resuming the Holy Grail of Eris. On another day, Scarlet was furious at Constance, feeling she'd been neglecting her revenge lately. It had been a month since the kidnapping. Kate's testimony revealed several facts about the mysterious De Gallus. The spell Lady Lily had left behind was one of the organization's passwords, and their plan was to steal her key. Constance handed over the book to Randolph, asking him to investigate the matter himself. Since the kidnapper had a sun tattoo, he was probably part of the organization. But he'd been assassinated in his cell before he could be interrogated. Witnesses placed Crown Princess Cecilia in the vicinity. Constance planned to call on Abigail so she could meet with Viscountess Aisha Huxley. Scarlet had mentioned having business with her back at the ball. There was a chance she'd ignore a request to meet with a girl like Constance. Hence, she decided to ask the House of O'Brien for a favor. Following that, Abigail would approach her alongside her little niece, Lucia. Surprisingly, Lucia's eyes darted towards Scarlet, admiring her amethyst eyes and red dress. How could she see her? Abigail promised Constance would receive an invite from the Huxleys soon. It was quite shocking that she believed Constance, but Constance had been a puzzling figure since knowing her. It all made sense now, because Scarlet was by her side. Despite not being able to see her, Abigail spoke of how Scarlet's execution pained her, so she was willing to assist. Scarlet responded, saying she wished Abigail would confine her jokes to that squashed frog she called a face. And even though she couldn't hear her, Abigail knew Scarlet was throwing insults. Meanwhile, Constance had no idea anyone else could see Scarlet apart from her. Apparently, Lucia was born with keen intuition. If anyone else had eyes like her, it would be Viscount Hamsworth, who was said to have the goddess's favor. Abigail had heard the Viscount could see unearthly things. On the carriage back, Constance recounted how Teresa Jennings lost her life in a murder-suicide attempt, and her husband, Kevin Jennings, had become an invalid. As far as Abigail was able to discover, De Gallus was selling the hallucinogen Jackal's Paradise. However, Scarlet would tell her to forget all that, and instead find out what happened 10 years ago from Aisha. Scarlet knew Aisha to be a gloomy, plain girl. One could say she was part of Scarlet's entourage, or a fan perhaps. If Scarlet wore a red dress, so would Aisha. And if it were blue, Aisha would do the same, in a similar color. She'd even copy Scarlet's hairstyle. And just once, she looked Scarlet in the eye, saying, "I want to be you." Of course, Scarlet would tell her the world didn't need 2 Scarlet Castiles. Elsewhere, Randolph would meet with Duke Adolphus Castile. He wanted to know about the Holy Grail of Eris. Adolphus claimed he was unfamiliar with the term. Then, he'd warn Randolph to finish building his hand before playing it. He said that was the secret to a long life. Back home, Constance and Scarlet went through what they knew, starting with the attempt to poison Cecilia 10 years ago, when they found poison in one of her house's water jars. Scarlet was suspected because of the moon bowstone earring that resembled hers, which was found lying beside the loser's water jar. As ill luck would have it, she called the house just hours earlier. There, she'd slapped Cecilia. However, both of Scarlet's earrings were with her when she first fell under suspicion. Everything she wore was one of a kind from the hands of a master craftsman. Yet, she wasn't cleared of suspicion. Upon inspection, she was told one of her earrings were fake. They claimed she had anticipated the investigation and prepared a replacement. In other words, someone swapped one of hers for the one found at the loser's estate while it was in the security force's safe. In the end, the king authorized a search of her home. No one would dare touch the Castillo residence without a royal order. After that, a half-empty vial of poison turned up in Scarlet's chambers, and she was marched off to a cell. Cecilia would be a suspect. After all, she benefited the most from Scarlet's death, or so she thought until recently. Right now, Scarlet wasn't so sure anymore. After 10 whole years, Cecilia seemed to loathe Enrique as much as ever, and she didn't seem attached to wealth or power. So, what was her real motive? Something was happening now, and Scarlet was certain that Cecilia had a hand in it. Going by what Amelia said, Cecilia was a whore's daughter raised in an orphanage. Kevin Jennings, who got close to the truth, wound up an addict. Plus, the merchant visiting Cecilia the day the 7th Prince of Fairs was abducted was too much of a coincidence. His name was Vado, which happened to be similar to Salvador. If they were the same person, then it could be concluded that Cecilia was involved with De Gallus as well, and that they had a hand in distributing Jackal's Paradise on Rosencreuz Street. Connecting the dots, Ulysses' abduction, Kate's kidnapping, and the spread of Jackal's Paradise could be tracked back to De Gallus. Most importantly, they attacked Constance as well. It would be more precise to say that something has been afoot for the past 10 years, right here in Adelbide. It'd be surprising to say it had nothing to do with Scarlet's execution. Whatever it was, Lady Lily probably lost her life over it. Her final message? Destroy the Holy Grail of Eris. Its meaning had yet to be uncovered. Constance would meet with Rudolph at a museum in St. Mark's Square. This place held donations from the Orlamoon family. Randolph hoped they might offer a clue to the key. Constance then remembered that Lily was on his mind constantly. He would then point to one of the holy books St. Anastasia received from the goddess. But Constance's stomach would signal she was hungry. As they stopped somewhere to get food, Randolph told her that Abigail's request would take some time. Cecilia owned the hospital where Kevin Jennings was a patient, so he'd need to go through bothersome formalities. Constance would then tell him that she and Scarlet went over what happened 10 years ago, mentioning that Scarlet's earring was switched. He had read the files. The one deemed an imitation wasn't made of bowstone, but a type of shell known as silver shell. As for the design, it was identical to Scarlet's. Seeing that silver shell didn't circulate by many routes, he looked up who had bought any at the time. One familiar name popped up, the Spencer family. That was also Aisha's maiden name. The Spencers owned several workshops that worked with precious metals. There'd be no surprise if Aisha had made replicas of Scarlet's earrings. There was a chance she might be involved with De Gallus. Randolph warned Constance not to do anything rash when going to question her. Standing where she had been executed, Scarlet didn't feel a thing. She also couldn't remember anything. Meanwhile, Aisha didn't expect Constance to get to her through Abigail. She had no idea why people said Constance resembled Scarlet. As far as Aisha was concerned, no one could take her place. Scarlet was her goddess. The mere fact that Scarlet remembered her name back then left her speechless. As Constance arrived at the manor, Aisha was enraged. She'd pick up a blade from her drawer before going to meet her. Meeting with Constance, she apologized for the state of the house, but Constance didn't mind. Bowing and greeting Aisha, she resembled Scarlet unmistakably. Going straight to business, Constance asked what that smell was. She mentioned that an acquaintance of hers had an excellent nose and memory, and so she asked Lady Huxley once more, "Why do you carry the scent of Jackal's Paradise?" Aisha broke out in a cold sweat. She'd been had, yet she tried to stay composed, feigning ignorance. She said the hallucinogen had been all the rage a decade ago, but claimed she was wearing a rare perfume today. A laughably poor liar she was. Aisha would turn to leave, but Constance told her she was behaving like an undisciplined child. In that moment, Aisha felt like a different presence was before her. Scarlet spoke through Constance, telling Aisha that trying to fool her was far more offensive than anything she had said. And so, she posed the same question she had asked earlier. "To whom do you imagine you're speaking to?" Aisha instantly saw Scarlet before her. She'd never mistake her for anyone else. 10 years ago, Scarlet Castile was the center of her world. Although Scarlet and Enrique didn't share anything like love, Aisha could see they were comfortable together, like siblings. She idolized them so much. Then, Cecilia stepped into the picture. Talk of their star-crossed love in defiance of status spread like wildfire. Aisha was desperate to do something to prevent the rumors from becoming true. One day, she'd have tea with her friend Sharon, who was looking thinner than usual. Sharon would show a potion, which was supposed to be some kind of foreign smelling salts. However, using too much was bad for one's health. Hearing that, Aisha recalled Cecilia's frail constitution. If she became ill, she'd have to return to her family estate. So, Aisha put on her replica of Scarlet's moon bowstone earrings and set out to pay a sympathy visit to Cecilia's residence. Unbeknownst to her, Scarlet had come and caused a scene hours earlier. Finding one of the water jars, she decided to pour the smelling salts into it, claiming it was all for Scarlet. Rather, if she could do this, she could become Scarlet. The truth was finally out. Aisha said she didn't know the salt was poison. Still, she had the bottle she used back then and said it was just a slimming drug. Aisha begged for Scarlet's forgiveness, but she had the chance to confess, knowing Scarlet was innocent, and didn't. Aisha insisted she did this all for her, even believing Scarlet would have done the same. However, Scarlet would rather die than do something so disgraceful. All Aisha did, she did for herself. Who did she think she was to use Scarlet as an excuse? Filled with guilt, Aisha brought out her blade, finally, to atone for her sins. But before she could kill herself, Scarlet would stop her. Her death would do nothing good now. Better to live and atone for her crimes. Suddenly, Aisha passed out. Then, her maids would take her away. A few days later, Aisha contacted the Mayflower Company, saying she wanted to confess her crimes. Leaving the house, Constance would meet Randolph waiting for her. She told him that Aisha was the one who poisoned the Luz family's water jar. Though she still had the vial, it was from 10 years ago. So, verifying it would take time. Plus, she had dealings with Day Gallus. Randolph told her to give the details when she was more herself. Back home, Scarlet lashed out at Constance. She didn't see any reason to save Aisha. She wanted her to die. But there was no way Constance could let her use Scarlet as an excuse right to the very end. Plus, they'd lose their chance at more clues if Aisha died. There was still a lot more to solve. Constance swore to spend the rest of her life ensuring Scarlet would get her revenge. On a rainy evening, Amelia met with a man named Rufus May. He informed her that the flow of money surrounding the crown princess was suspicious. Afterward, Rufus reported back to Deborah, explaining that Aldous Clayton was on his way to interview Aisha. However, Rufus doubted that Aisha was the true quarry Deborah was hunting. On his way to see Aisha, Aldous noticed something unsettling. The butler who had just passed him in the hallway suddenly vanished. Alarmed, he rushed into Aisha's room and found her poisoned. With her remaining strength, she told him the culprit was Salvador of Day Gallus and that he had taken the medicine bottle. She also asked Aldous to investigate her cousin, Sharon. In her final moments, Aisha wondered if Scarlet could ever forgive her. Aldous assured her she would. Then, Aisha died. What Aldous didn't realize was that everything had unfolded exactly as planned. Servants burst into the room moments later, and upon seeing Aisha's body, immediately accused him of murder. With no time to argue, Aldous was forced to flee through the window. Deborah's scheme had worked perfectly. Abigail's guard dog had been removed. Later, Lady Audrey berated Aldous harshly. She demanded to know why a wanted murderer had showed up at their doorstep. Though Aldous tried to explain, she refused to listen. The two simply did not see eye to eye. Lady Audrey served as the instructor for the girls at the House of Plenty. She taught them how to apply makeup, select dresses, and, more importantly, how to wrap gentlemen around their fingers. When the girls began chattering, she scolded them sharply, but when she placed the blame on Abigail, the girls protested. One demanded to know what Abigail had done wrong. Audrey explained that the former Duke O'Brien had charged her with guarding the establishment, and she took that responsibility seriously. She would toss out any lazy layabouts without hesitation. Grumbling, she stormed off. Once she was gone, Aldous showed Constance a newspaper article about Aisha's cousin, Sharon Spencer. Sharon had died the very same day as Aisha. Aldous was certain it was murder, and he suspected Day Gallus was behind it. Randolph soon entered with grave news. Abigail had been arrested on suspicion of murdering Aisha Huxley. An anonymous tip had revealed that Aldous was actually Rudy, the bouncer of Folkvanger, and that Abigail had provided him with a false identity. As a result, she was being investigated as the mastermind behind Aisha's death. Abigail had nothing to do with it, but Randolph reminded them that she had written to Aisha just a week earlier. Constance remembered that she had asked Abigail to help secure that meeting and was struck with guilt. Aldous decided he would turn himself in, believing it would save Abigail. Constance stopped him. His surrender would solve nothing. Instead, they would face this together. Scarlet pulled Constance aside and reminded her that they had their own methods. Desperate, Constance asked for help. and Scarlet agreed without hesitation. The charges against Abigail were false, meaning there was no solid evidence. Their enemies would likely send a judge already in their pocket. The case was assigned to Earl Calvin Campbell, a notorious womanizer, rumored to have fathered children across the land. A man like that was bound to have skeletons in his closet. Scarlet's plan was simple: uncover his secrets and blackmail him. Viscount Hamsworth suggested inviting courtesans to the Earl John Doe ball to entice Campbell with drunken revelry. The plan was quickly set in motion. If things went poorly, Aldous was prepared to confront the Earl at gunpoint. One of the girls thanked Constance for giving them the chance to repay Abigail. Years ago, she and Rebecca had been trapped in a horrific establishment, virtually a prison. Escape had seemed impossible. Then, Abigail appeared and purchased every girl there, rescuing them all. They owed her everything. Even Lady Audrey, who initially insulted the girls as barely fit to be funeral flowers, ultimately supported the plan. Anyone who picked on Abigail picked a fight with Folkvanger. She stopped the girls to use every trick in the book. They would strip the Earl down to nothing, figuratively speaking. At the ball, Earl Campbell stood apart from the festivities, frustrated that no one had chosen him despite his preparations. Then, Miriam, the pride of Folkvanger, appeared like a rose fairy. He approached her eagerly, only for Hamsworth to intercept and claim her. The Earl became a laughingstock. His mood shifted when Rebecca stumbled into him looking troubled. He offered to be the wind that blew her clouds away. Rebecca confided that Abigail had been arrested, and she feared ending up in destitute. Campbell admitted he would be presiding over the trial. What he expected to be a dull assignment had suddenly become interesting. He promised to provide for her, if it came to that. But when Rebecca mentioned Hamsworth had a similar offer, Campbell doubled down, bragging about his wealth. She then sweetly asked where that wealth came from. Later, Rebecca reported back to Constance. Campbell had been siphoning funds from hospitals and orphanages, state-sponsored institutions. On paper, the money appeared clean. He funneled it through secret accounts tied to a citizens group known as the Violet Association. Scarlet immediately recognized the name. She pointed out that Kimberly was affiliated with that association. Constance confronted Kimberly about her connection to Earl Campbell. Kimberly praised him as a sympathetic supporter of their cause. When Constance hinted at illegal donations and secret accounts, Kimberly's expression darkened. She suspected someone in their youth committee was the true rat, using the association as a cover. Kimberly realized Constance intended to blackmail Campbell into acquitting Abigail. It wasn't a poor strategy, but Constance alone might not succeed. Kimberly offered to handle it. The O'Briens would not fall on her watch. To prove her sincerity, she left Constance with a clue. What color are violets? In their country, violets carried a reddish hue, symbolic of the royal family's eye color. In Ferris, royalty bore bluish-purple eyes. The symbolism ran deep. Constance began piecing together the truth about the Violet Association, but Scarlet interrupted. It was nearly time for the verdict. As Abigail stood before the court, Constance waited outside, praying. Soon, Randolph emerged with the news. Abigail had not been found guilty due to insufficient evidence. Earl Campbell looked as though he himself had been sentenced to death, delivering the verdict. Overwhelmed, Constance nearly collapsed. Randolph caught her in his arms. By the closeness, she turned bright red. She thought his chest was sure firm. He worried she might have a fever, but she quickly insisted she was fine. Abigail returned home safely, greeted tearfully by Lucia and the others. Relief filled the house. Soon after, a man was arrested for Aisha's murder. He confessed and took his own life that very evening. Yet, rumors began spreading that someone had leaked information about Aisha, leading to their death. The accusation targeted Amelia Hobbs. Desperate for a dramatic comeback, Amelia confronted Cecilia, addressing her as Cece, and insinuated that she and a boy were the only survivors unaccounted for in a burned-down orphanage. In an instant, Cecilia drew a dagger and pressed it to Amelia's throat. Cece is dead, she said coldly. If Amelia valued her life, she would leave the country by day's end. Otherwise, her shabby red hair would be dyed crimson. Meanwhile, Constance walked the streets, recalling Abigail's warning to stay cautious. Everything had unfolded too smoothly to simply be the resolution of a decade-old crime. Something bigger was at play. Dave Gallus was searching for Lily's key. If they could unravel the mystery behind the key and the phrase, the Holy Grail of Eris, they might uncover the truth. Suddenly, a girl named San bumped into Constance for directions to the Grand Merillion. Her subordinate, Eularia, hurried over, scolding her for getting lost and urging her to use a map. Scarlet noticed San carried a large bundle on her back. She handed the map to Constance and asked her name. When she heard it was Grail, she smiled and called it wonderful before departing Eularia. Later, Randolph returned home and placed Lily's key before Constance. He had traced its origin. It was merely a decorative key-shaped trinket. The inscription had been added at Lily's request. P10E3. Something clicked in Constance's mind. She rushed to her room, spread out the map Son had given her, and told Scarlet she believed she had finally figured it out. Deciphering Lady Lily's message, Constance was able to figure out the location on the map. Scarlet figured they'd probably be looking for somewhere the Orlamoons made donations. This would bring them to the Museum of History. Arriving there, Constance pointed out a historical scripture in a showcase, but she was hesitant to reach for it. Randolph then took it, and inside, a letter was found. Lily had always hated to lose. Without a doubt, she believed the goddesses had chosen her because she was special, at least until that day. 21 years ago, at the age of 5, Lily first met Scarlet, and for the first time in her life, she felt defeated. She humbly introduced herself, but Scarlet found her face dreadful and walked away. Lily reprimanded her for being rude, demanding she give her name as well. As Scarlet introduced herself, Lily was stunned by her radiance. Scarlet also pointed out that Lily harbored ill will towards her, and such a bearing marked her out as a fourth-rate lady. That was how these two met. Several years later, when Lily was 8, they were chosen to be the Crown Prince's playmates during his convalescence. So, they went to spend time together at the royal family's summer retreat. The Crown Prince was quite shy and unwilling to meet the girls, without a care for etiquette. Scarlet questioned if he couldn't talk. He wasn't fond of her insolence, asking if she didn't know who he was. But she'd quip how could she know someone who had yet to introduce themselves. After Enrique gave his name, she'd drag him off to show a sight worth seeing. Stepping out in the sun, they found themselves on the top of a tower. Enrique marveled at the beautiful lay of the land before him. With this sight, Scarlet let him know it was a waste to spend all his time indoors. There was a wide world out there to see. On another occasion, Enrique happened to be running late. He needed to submit some work before his tutor would get back to his office. Seeing him cry, Lily was moved to help. Scarlet, however, found it tiresome. So, Lily pretended to faint, giving Enrique time to go turn in his work. After that, they went out to play. Around that time, the Crown Prince started to laugh more often. As the years passed by, Enrique and Scarlet were engaged, and Lily assumed they'd get married. But with the arrival of Cecilia, destiny started to go awry. Around the time Scarlet was imprisoned, Lily approached Enrique, insisting that Scarlet would never do such a thing. He mentioned that a moon bow stow earring was found at the Luz residence, and it resembled the exact ones he had given her. Regardless, he didn't want to see Scarlet put to death, but his father, the king, had made his decision. A strange outcome, Lily thought. Why would the king involve himself in the attempted murder of a viscount's daughter? Plus, she wondered why Duke Castile wasn't doing anything, given that his daughter was bound for the headsman. Hearing that it'd be a public execution, Scarlet sounded excited. This way, she'd show them all that she'd be the one with the last laugh. And on the execution day, Lily sadly watched from the sidelines. Before she knew it, 8 years had gone by since Scarlet's death. At the time, Lily had come to devote herself to helping the poor. One day, while looking for a good place to establish a school, she surprisingly saw Cecilia. It was strange to see her in a place like this. Lily would tail her, eavesdropping on her conversation nearby. As Cecilia met with a subordinate, the man informed her that the Holy Grail of Eris was finally about to resume. The second contact mentioned they couldn't afford another failure, and neither could Ferris. Cecilia had successfully gotten Viscount Luz hooked on Jackal's Paradise, and she was having explosives smuggled in from Melvina. The revolt could start at any time. Lily was shocked to hear these things, but also wise enough to keep herself silent. Running away, she speculated the Holy Grail of Eris was a Parisian invasion plot. From that day on, she began gathering information in secret. Her contract marriage to Randolph, on the condition of mutual non-interference, made it easier for her to move freely. While meeting with one of her contacts, he'd tell her about De Gallus, the ones responsible for bringing in Jackal's Paradise. But he also warned her to be careful. Once their sights were set on her, she'd be done for. Leaving the casino, she noticed Salvador already keeping an eye on her. Before Lily knew it, she was boxed in on all sides. They had infiltrated everywhere she could think of. There was nothing the likes of her could do. If it ever came to war, she felt bad that the first victims would be Tony and the other orphan children. So, she taught them the spell Kiriki Kirikuku, telling them to recite it to anyone who came looking for her if something were to happen. If they reacted to the phrase, then it was certain they were bad people. Tony would have to gather everyone and run. The kids wanted her to be with them, and Tony promised to do whatever it took to stop bad things from happening to her. Lily was moved to tears, wondering how she could safeguard these children's futures. That she decided to make one last wager. She'd meet with Enrique, mentioning that she came to visit his consort. It was obvious the crown prince didn't marry Cecilia out of love. There must have been some sort of goal he had in mind, and Lily figured he had picked up on things himself. She asked what he'd been doing for 8 whole years, calling him a fourth-rate prince. She didn't want to believe he had given up. As always, he was still a crybaby, and just like before, Lily offered to buy him some time. During her meeting with Cecilia, Lily asked the crown princess if the Holy Grail of Eris meant anything to her. In the event those words meant anything, she advised the crown princess to rethink her plans. After all, she couldn't afford another failure. Lily was merely a young, sheltered noblewoman. There was no way she could stop the plans of Date Gallus, but she wasn't about to go down without a fight. Since Cecilia and her co-conspirators said they couldn't afford to fail, Lily would use that to her advantage. She'd make them think their secret was out and delay their plots. Showing a glimpse of her fake key, she misled them, and if she managed to get away, their misconception would become truth. The real truth, as far as she knew it, was in the museum. Unable to destroy the Holy Grail of Eris, Lily left trails behind so someone else would take over, someone alive in the future. How haughty and proud they'd have to be to dare look down on the gods, and how unbelievably soft-hearted to risk everything for someone else. It would take a miracle for someone like that to show up. Not like anything was wrong in believing miracles. Till the end, Lily couldn't understand how Scarlet managed to smile back then, but she was glad she did. Besides, if Scarlet could do it, then so could she. After all, Lily Orlamoon had always hated to lose. We return to the museum, where Constance now realized that the Holy Grail of Eris was a Parisian military operation to invade Adelbide. Lily placed the future in the hands of whoever found the letter. As Constance left with Scarlet, she was approached by Amelia. Amelia handed over a document containing everything she had dug up on Cecilia, and she asked Constance to make good use of it. Constance would meet up with Abigail, showing her the documents and explaining everything. At a glance, Abigail could tell Cecilia's mother was a woman of the streets. Having found out about this, Kevin Jennings developed a crippling drug addiction and was placed in St. Nicholas Hospital, run by Cecilia's charity. As for the purpose of the hospital, it was probably to test Jackal's Paradise, all in the name of treatment. Earl Campbell used to oversee that hospital, and he was linked to Cecilia by Simon Darkian, Deborah's husband. With so many parties involved, Scarlet was frustrated. Who exactly was she to exact her revenge on? In that case, she would trash everyone who had anything to do with her execution. Constance broke out in a cold sweat, wondering how exactly Scarlet planned to do this. Later, Randolph met with Dylan Belsford concerning reports about Scarlet's execution. Dylan mentioned how Constance had been poking around, but Randolph simply stared him down. Dylan was his superior officer and commandant at that. But still, Randolph wasn't fazed. Apparently, Dylan had been accused of treason and nearly executed around that time as well, but he shoved the topic aside, stating that they needed to be more concerned about Ferris. Randolph had tried to probe Candle Levine, but he seemed disinclined to make the matter public. Ferris's king was bedridden due to illness, and there were rumors of a succession dispute. That wasn't all. Ferris was reminting coins too. Gunpowder, iron, and wagon production were growing rapidly as well. The plot was obvious, a war with Adelbide, and they didn't even need a proper justification. Later, Constance and Randolph were approached by San and Eulalia. It turns out, they were from Ferris, and were here to speak with Randolph. Because Ulysses was captured in Adelbide, San told him that Ferris would use this as a justification to declare war on their country. Of course, it was all staged. She mentioned that Date Gallus was orchestrating the whole thing behind the scenes. Because of this, Her Royal Highness Alexandria, 3rd Princess of Ferris, sent San and Eulalia to help prevent the war, so they asked to work with Constance and Randolph. Constance asked why the Holy Grail of Eris failed 10 years ago, and San answered it was because of Scarlet's execution. Afterwards, Randolph returned to Duke Castile, talking about Eleanor Cibola, Scarlet's mother. She was a lineal descendant of Cornelia of the Starry Crown, the last ruler of the vast empire that Ferris once was. The royal family of Adelbide had reddish violet eyes, while Parisian royals had bluish violet eyes. Scarlet's amethyst eyes, blending red and blue, had a special significance in Ferris. Most likely, Randolph speculated that the true goal of the Holy Grail of Eris was to install a descendant of the old imperial family, Scarlet, on Adelbide's throne, hence transforming the country into a vassal state of Ferris. However, Scarlet's execution stalled those plans, saving Adelbide. Or perhaps someone ensured the events would play out that way. In other words, Scarlet's execution was her father's doing. The Duke would think nothing of sacrificing his own daughter to save his country. Refusing to stand for this, Constance was determined to meet with Duke Castile. Thanks to Randolph, the meeting was arranged. There, Constance asked the Duke if he was responsible for sending Scarlet to the scaffold. Adolphus Castile asked Constance what made her think he was the one behind his daughter's death. She explained that the bottle of poison found in Scarlet's chambers could only have been planted by someone capable of sneaking through a duke's house. The only one who could do that without leaving a trace was him. Strangely, Adolphus and Ernst came into the world on the same day. Despite his capabilities, Adolphus still wished to serve Ernst Adelheid. One day, Ernst told him that the Republic of Soldita was begging him to take a descendant of Cornelia Ferris off their hands. Such a liege was so dangerous that he couldn't entrust it to just any noble house. Adolphus was his only real option, and he was happy to oblige. Later on, he would meet Eleanor Shibola. As Adolphus's bride from across the sea, she was the very picture of a good wife. Her singular shortcoming was her frail constitution. However, it wasn't long before Scarlet would be born. Dylan and Ernst were quite fond of Scarlet. Looking back, those might have been the final days they'd laughed together in blissful ignorance. Eventually, Adolphus told Ernest there were rumors of a strange drug circulating around. It was mostly popular among young aristocrats. It begged the question, how were they able to obtain it? Of course, this drug was Jackal's Paradise. At the time, it seemed a trivial matter. Some months later, Ernst was shocked, hearing that Dylan had been imprisoned for treason. Given the circumstances, Adolphus doubted he could avoid the headsman. Without a doubt, he was framed. The goal was simple, to wage war, and the culprit was none other than the kingdom of Ferris. Since Dylan was the pillar of Adelheid's border defense, Ferris planned to invade once he was dead. This only proved that there were traitors in their midst. Amid it all, one man had seen a meteoric rise, Simon Darkian. The poisoning accusation against Scarlet happened to be a coincidence. After all, Ferris wanted her on the throne. Without her, their plans would fall apart. The next plan of action was absurd. Regardless, Adolphus suggested they make use of Scarlet. Executing her would stall Ferris and sow the sentiment that public executions were barbaric. He would task Kimberly Smith of the Violet Association with leading the outcry. That way, they could delay Dylan's execution. In the meantime, Adolphus planned to gather proof of Dylan's innocence. Ernst, still thinking about Scarlet, tried to call his attention to it, but Adolphus simply told him to commit to memory the face of everyone who pleaded for Scarlet's life. Ferris's agents would definitely be among them. Adolphus was determined to have the last laugh, and so that was how Scarlet met her end. Constance then told the Duke she was doing this for Scarlet. Given permission, she approached him and slapped him so hard that he had another flashback. It was back when Eleanor lay sick in bed, and he came to see her. You'd think he cared about her. He claimed she was his wife after all, but she asked him to spare the foolery. A woman he didn't sleep with and only saw to exchange the occasional greeting wasn't what most would call a wife. Eleanor might have been a silly girl, but even she knew that the blood in her veins could spark a fire. But she wouldn't so easily accept the life of being a prisoner. It was nothing but a living death. She wanted to have some harsh words with Adolphus, and she ended up punching his face hard. It wasn't exactly what you'd call words. However, back where she came from, they talked to dunderheads with their fists. Since coming to this country, Eleanor had done a lot of thinking and decided to live out her life as she pleased. That was Cornelia Ferris's dying wish. And if Adolphus had a problem, he'd have to tell Cornelia herself. Afterwards, Constance panicked, realizing what she had just done. Scarlet would apologize, saying her mother taught her to speak to dunderheads with her fist. Constance made the excuse this was a custom from the homeland of her friend's mother. Hearing this, Adolphus wasn't angry. He asked what else her friend wanted, offering his head. If they ever had need of it, they only needed to ask. Constance asked if he wanted to die. It was then he realized death was what he'd been longing for. He believed he deserved punishment. Of course, Scarlet would be too pitiful for words. Robbed of her life through no fault of her own, Scarlet would take over Constance's body, telling her father she'd never once thought herself as pitiful. Although she felt anger and sadness, she knew how awkward and proud her father was. There was no need for her father to pity her. After all, she came into this world loved, for she knew that even her father loved her. Stunned, words escaped Adolphus. Seeing the image of his daughter, he recalled his times with Eleanor. As for the rest of Scarlet's complaints, she would have to tell them to Cornelia Ferris. Adolphus understood what she meant, as it was something her mother always said. He would make sure that Scarlet's casket was made of jet. It was a sacred wood, said to guide souls to the promised land. And he wouldn't forget a blanket woven of moon-worn cocoon. He couldn't have his daughter getting chills. She often caught them when she was little, and grew feverish so quickly. Adolphus also thought to add lovely engravings to her casket. She was never the type to settle for less than the best. Recalling how willful she was, he cried bitterly. Had there been any other way, he would have given his own life many times over. If only he had told her even once how much he loved her. As Constance took her leave, for a moment, the Duke could see Scarlet beside her. So, he wished Constance would do her best for his daughter. Later on, Randolph informed Dylan that Simon Darkian was with Day Gallus. Cecilia had recently purchased the St. Nicholas Hospital. when Campbell owned it. Tax inspectors gave even blank books as a pass. Randolph suspected Simon was in charge of those inspections. A man named Edmund Park, who did the hospital's accounting, was found murdered, most likely to silence him. Suspecting secret books were kept, Dylan felt they'd be able to round up the whole gang if they found the books. So, he entrusted the matter to Randolph. He then offered his condolences, hearing that Simon Ulster had passed. The funeral was today, but only for close family. Randolph would be going alone. Elsewhere, Constance met up with San and Eulalia. Much hadn't changed on their end. Second Prince Roderick was still avoiding public appearances. Third Princess Alexandra was still locked in the tower and on track to be burned. Fourth Prince Theophilus was already acting like he was king. His followers had even picked a date for the coronation. He was the most obvious suspect for leading the Holy Grail of Eris. As Mylene approached Constance, San and Eulalia took their leave. On her way to becoming a real reporter, Mylene was writing articles to sell to the papers. Her latest was on the suspicious death of Edmund Park. His death appeared to have been a work-related vendetta. His clients included the Raven Trading Company and St. Nicholas Hospital. Curiosity struck Constance and Scarlett as they heard the hospital's name. According to Mylene, Edmund and Earl Campbell were gambling buddies, and their favorite gambling den was under a restaurant called the Goat's Hoof. Arriving at the place, Constance was suddenly approached by Kimberly. They went in together, and when the waiter came for their orders, Kimberly spoke a secret phrase. Showing a key, she told the man she was here to pick up something for Ed. He would then lead them to the underground den. Seeing Constance was here about Edmund's case, she wondered who had told her. Hearing that it was a friend who wanted to be a reporter, Kimberly said she had promise. Then, she asked if Constance knew who the Ulsters were. Ulster wasn't merely a surname, but a title for agents who disposed of the royal family's enemies. Although Randolph served in the military now, he was trained by the late Simon Ulster. Before they could continue, the waiter came back, handing Kimberly a secret accounting ledger. On their way out, they'd meet trouble. Some people definitely didn't want them reading that ledger. Kimberly told Constance to keep the ledger in her purse and hurry out the back door. That was all the help she could offer now. As for Kimberly, she too was trained by Simon Ulster. As Constance left, Kimberly took out her pistol. While mourning at Simon's grave, Randolph noticed a shade covering him. Turning around, he saw Constance holding an umbrella for him due to the rain. She then showed him the document Kimberly left in her care. He was upset at her for always acting on her own, but considering he was alone as well, she decided they'd call it even. Everyone close to Randolph had been dying one by one. It made him ask if she saw him as death itself. Constance pointed out that his fiancée lost her last betrothed to another woman, the same woman who made a spectacle of herself at a ball, got mixed up in one criminal incident after another, and worst of all, she was haunted by the wickedest woman of the age. Her words soothed his heart. Then, he'd take her hand so they could leave together. As Pamela lay on her bed, looking dejected, the old man beside her could tell her spirit wasn't broken. So, he asked if she didn't want revenge on the one who had done this to her, Constance Grail. Meanwhile, Randolph told Constance that Kimberly survived only with an injured arm, and she'd be out of the hospital soon. That ledger had allowed them to arrest Siam Darkian for falsifying official documents. His wife, Deborah, was sent to the Rudolph Convent on suspicion of human trafficking and smuggling Jackal's Paradise. With this, Day Gallus would be stripped of its biggest backer. After that, they'd meet with Abigail. She was disappointed to hear that Deborah was involved in the smuggling. Concerning where to find Prince Ulysses, Simon had no idea, and they had mere days before the Pharysian delegation departed. If they couldn't find the prince before then, it would mean war. Scarlett wondered if any of the Day Gallus collaborators controlled the harbor. The kidnapper was a merchant with an unusual skin tone by their standards. Yet, not a soul had reported seeing him. So there was a chance the prince was someplace a man like that wouldn't stand out. Hearing the idea, Randolph mentioned Kiara Grafton. There was a wharf on her family's lands. Since she had warehouses perfect for hiding a person, he decided to investigate, and Constance would go with him. As they left, Aldous rushed to Abigail, bringing terrible news. Deborah had escaped from the convent. On the carriage, Constance thought Randolph seemed angry that she came. On the contrary, he felt it was better to have her within his sights than let her run off on her own. With that being said, he might not need to keep an eye on her for much longer. Once Prince Ulysses was found, and all this was resolved, Constance and Scarlett would have achieved their goal as well. Constance knew what he was about to say, but didn't want to hear it. He told her he'd make arrangements for her to dissolve their engagement when the time comes. That way, no blame would fall on her. As for Randolph, it seemed he had no plans to marry. He didn't believe he'd be able to make a wife happy. For an investigator, he definitely didn't see the signs here. Elsewhere, while Lucia returned from getting treats for Abigail, a cat suddenly snatched the bag from her. The maid quickly left to retrieve it. Following after her, Lucia would be shocked by what she saw next. There, Deborah stood, holding a blade to the maid's throat. Lucia demanded the maid be released at once. knowing Deborah was really after her. Meanwhile, Constance and Randolph would arrive at the warehouse. It seemed awfully quiet, so Scarlet went to take a peek through the windows. At that moment, a grenade landed behind them, letting off a terrible explosion. Luckily, Randolph shielded Constance. Bullets were fired at them, and Scarlet helped pinpoint one of the goons on the roof. Randolph quickly took him out with a headshot. He decided to act as bait, while Constance got to safety. In the midst of the gunfight, Randolph's arm was wounded. Constance wanted to chase after, but Scarlet would stop her. Fear and confusion filled her eyes. Then, she asked Scarlet what to do. On the other hand, Randolph found himself only thinking about Constance's safety. He noticed some of the men had been knocked out. Seeing the purple sparks, he was certain it was Scarlet. Thanks to her, he could handle the rest. When it got dark, Randolph returned to Constance, complaining about her not running away. But she'd flipped the tables on him, calling him stupid. How could she have possibly left him in this situation and run? Surprisingly, he found her insults amusing. Without realizing it, Constance was already crying because of how scared she was. She feared he might die. Likewise, he was afraid to lose her. As they watched the beautiful reflection of the moon on the sea, Randolph turned to her, saying he'd love to walk through life at her side. Took him long enough. Of course, Constance would allow it. Even if the gods objected, she'd allow him everything, and if anyone tried to find fault in him, she'd give them a proper slap. Returned back to Lucia, who was being held hostage by Deborah. But she would not be frightened. Deborah was jealous of Abigail being right all the time, so she couldn't wait to see the look on her face when she sent Lucia's head. Just then, Salvador would interrupt her. Out of nowhere, he stabbed Deborah, making it clear that he had a policy not to kill kids. He ordered her to go back to the convent and keep the security force's eyes on her. To prevent her from telling any tales, he brought some goons to make sure she wouldn't be able to talk after they were done with her. As Deborah was dragged, she screamed desperately, but all that noise fell on deaf ears. Lucia was asked to run home, but she heard a voice calling out for help, and the voice was coming from a sack nearby. Salvador thought she was quite sharp to have noticed. Later on, San and Eulalia had found where Ulysses had been kept hostage earlier. By the looks of it, he was being fed. The fact that the prince was abducted in his country was all Pharis needed to start a war. Theophilus already acted like he was king. His agents would dispose of Ulysses at once. After all, only he and Ulysses inherited the bluish-violet eyes that marked their royalty. But if the young prince was being kept alive, it meant Theophilus wasn't the one behind this. Sam then came to a conclusion. Their real enemy was second prince Roderick. Back with Constance and Scarlet, they were yet to find out where Lucia was, and Deborah had turned up in no condition to talk. Like the ghost from the past, Pamela approached Constance. She looked so drained of life. Apparently, she had spotted Constance in a warehouse on the Grafton Wharf. Constance tried to deny it, but that deadly look from Pamela's eyes made her frightened. Following that, Randolph informed Constance that King Ernst was going to Melvina. The grenades at the wharf were made with smuggled explosives from Melvina. In exchange for overlooking that fact, the king wanted a trade agreement on arms. Constance recalled hearing about the explosives from Cecilia back at the slums. The crown princess confronted Enrique because he never mentioned the pact with Melvina to her. Melvina bordered the Luz domain, where she grew up, and the agreement would only allow the kingdom to trade freely with them. So, Enrique questioned her strange reaction. He had known all about the explosives she smuggled in ever since. After all, he married her despite all objections, and even his father and Duke Castillo gave their blessings. Cecilia threatened that he could be accused if word got out, but Enrique wasn't fazed by her words, admitting he'd been guilty for a long time now. His next action would cost him. He'd drink the glass of water, unaware that Cecilia had tampered with it. By the time she pointed it out, it was too late. Meeting with Rufus, Cecilia told him it'd be easier for her to act with the prince still alive. All their plans were now in place, with Ulysses being moved to a dungeon. Despite unforeseen developments, now was their time to strike. It also turned out that George Gaina was working with them. Soon enough, the news began spreading the news of Ulysses' kidnapping. People were scared, hearing Pharis was ready to go to war. Worse, Pamela would serve as a witness, accusing Constance of the kidnapping. George would show up at her front door to arrest her for aiding and abetting the abduction of Ulysses Pharis. She was taken in for questioning, but she insisted she did nothing wrong. George asked if Randolph did the dirty work, saying they had testimony that he drew his gun. Constance figured Randolph was probably being questioned somewhere else. This way, they could delay the search for Ulysses and hasten the war. Suddenly, Constance admitted to the kidnapping of the prince. Not only that, she admitted having backers who wouldn't hesitate to kill to get what they wanted. Realizing what she was about to do, George tried to stop her, but it was too late. She revealed the name of the organization, Dague Gallus. After that, she requested the presence of Viscount Hamsworth so that her engagement to Randolph would be broken off. Randolph ran over to meet Constance in her cell. He was furious, but she explained that he wouldn't be able to act freely unless they severed ties. To think she would cast him off just like that. If the day came when all this was over and they could laugh together again, she wanted to drop in on a certain someone uninvited. That someone was strong, kind, and always in the right. But he was such an oaf that he convinced himself that he couldn't make anyone happy. This time, she wanted to be the one to take him by the hand. It would prove difficult, as Randolph was certain she'd be proposed to first. Not just by anyone, but by a dull man who couldn't manage a witty remark or pick a decent spot for a date. Placing his hand on her cheek, Constance cried. Then he kissed her on the forehead. While the king was gone, second Prince Johann Adelheid was confronted by Rufus. Placing his daughter's hairpin on the table, Rufus threatened the prince. He promised nothing would happen to Johann's daughter as long as he publicly executed Constance Grail. Ooh, only 2 more episodes left. Will she survive or meet the tragic end just like Scarlet? Subscribe to keep up, if you even care. I kinda don't. But for now, watch this next video. It's me, Comfy T. I'll see you all in the next one.